On Father's Day, my daughter Samantha sent me a gift box meant to be a surprise. My wife, Jessica, glanced at it and whispered, "Don't open it." Confused, I asked, "Why not?" When I peeked inside, my heart stopped. 10 minutes later, police sirens wailed outside. You won't believe what was in that box. Before I share more, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment about where you're reading this from. The argument started earlier that morning. Samantha's voice echoed through our living room. "Dad, do you even get that I need the money now, not after you're gone?" A coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Dark liquid soaked into our Persian rug, leaving a stain like a bruise. Her cheeks burned red, and her manicured nails shook. I clutched the inheritance papers tighter, their edges crumpling under my grip. 30 years of careful saving, now twisted into a weapon in my daughter's desperate hands. "Samantha," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I'm not your personal bank. You'll get your inheritance when the time is right." Peter, her husband, slouched deeper into our leather couch, smirking. "Come on, Will. She's your only kid. What's a few $1,000 to help us out?" A few thousand? The nerve of him. Last month, it was his gambling debts. Before that, Samantha's endless shopping sprees, designer clothes, spa days, vacations they couldn't afford. Their demands grew bigger, bolder, with no end in sight. "Help you out?" I stood, my 66-year-old knees creaking. "I've been helping you for 3 years straight. My retirement savings aren't your piggy bank." Jessica appeared in the doorway, twisting a dish towel in her hands. "Please, everyone, let's calm down. We can talk this out like adults." "Talk it out." Samantha spun toward her mother, her voice sharp. "He's sitting on a fortune, while we're drowning in debt." "Debt you created," I said softly, but the words cut deep. "Debt from your choices." A family photo on the mantel lay face down. Had it fallen during Samantha's outburst, or had someone flipped it on purpose? Its silver frame caught the ceiling light, reflecting a blank, empty glow. Peter leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his grin fading into something colder. "Look, Will, you're not getting any younger. Why not share your money now? You could see how much we'd appreciate it." "Old man," I muttered, the disrespect sour on my tongue. This from a guy who'd never held a job longer than 6 months, who lived off Samantha's credit cards and my handouts. I worked 43 years for that money. Each word grew heavier. 43 years of long days, skipped meals, missed birthdays. Also, Samantha could have a good childhood. So Jessica and I could retire with some peace. Peace. Samantha's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. "What's peaceful about hoarding cash while your daughter struggles?" Struggles. I glanced at her designer purse, her glossy hair, the sparkling bracelet on her wrist. Peter's sneakers were brand new, probably costing more than my monthly grocery bill. Their struggle looked pretty cozy to me. Your struggles are your own doing. Every crisis, every emergency, every plea for cash, you brought it on yourselves. The room went quiet, the silence heavy and tense. Jessica stepped closer, her face pale. "William," she whispered, "maybe we could what?" Samantha snapped, her voice breaking. "Keep pretending he's a good dad? Keep acting like he cares about us instead of his precious money." The words hit like punches. Greedy, uncaring, cold. After 43 years of sacrifice, this was what I got. Peter stood, his face twisting into something meaner. "You know what, Will? I think you like watching us beg. Makes you feel big, doesn't it? Holding all that power. Get out," I said, the words rumbling from deep inside. "Both of you. Out of my house. Your house." Samantha's eyes flashed with anger. "This house Mom helped pay for. This house I grew up in. You can't just throw out your own daughter." "Watch me," I said, but they didn't budge. Samantha crossed her arms, defiant. Peter stood beside her, smirking again, like he knew I wouldn't follow through. The air felt thick, like a storm about to break. Jessica hovered near the doorway, her dish towel now a knotted mess in her hands. "William, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Let's not do this. Not today. Not today." I turned to her, my frustration spilling over. "When? Then? When they've bled us dry? When there's nothing left for us to live on?" Samantha stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "You're so obsessed with your money, you've forgotten what family means. You'd rather die clutching your bank account than help us when we need it. Need it. I shook my head, exhaustion creeping in. You don't need another handbag. Peter doesn't need to bet on horses. You want me to fund your bad habits, and I'm done. The gift box from Father's Day sat unopened on the coffee table, a silent reminder of how this day was supposed to go. I thought it was a sweet gesture from Samantha, maybe a sign she still cared. But Jessica's warning, don't open. It echoed in my mind. What was inside that box? Why were the police coming? Before anyone could speak, a sharp knock rattled the front door. Blue and red lights flashed through the window, painting the walls in eerie streaks. Samantha froze. Peter's smirk vanished. Jessica dropped the dish towel, her eyes wide with fear that I moved toward the door, my heart pounding. Whatever was in that box, it was about to change everything. They stood in my living room like wolves circling a wounded animal, sensing my hesitation, waiting for me to give in, to offer the usual apology, the usual compromise, or the usual check to buy a moment of peace. Not this time. I walked to the front door, my steps heavy but determined, and flung it open. A rush of cool evening air poured in, carrying the sweet scent of honeysuckle from the garden and the faint sound of neighbors laughing down the street. Normal families, having normal conversations, their voices warm and carefree. When was the last time we'd laughed like that together, Samantha? I said, my voice steady, not turning to face her. Take your husband and go. Don't come back until you're ready to talk respectfully about your money problems and solutions that don't involve my savings. Her eyes narrowed, and she grabbed her purse from the couch, her movements sharp and angry. You'll regret this, Dad, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. When you're old, sick, and alone, begging for someone to care for you, remember this moment. Remember how you chose money over your own family. Her high heels clicked across the hardwood floor, each step like a gunshot echoing in the tense silence. Peter, her husband, trailed behind her, his face hard. He paused at the doorway, his hand gripping the frame. This isn't over, old man, he muttered, his voice low and threatening. Family doesn't abandon family. The door slammed shut behind them, so hard the windows rattled in their frames. The silence that followed was heavier than their shouting, pressing down on me like a weight that I stood there, frozen, my hand still clutching the cold brass doorknob. Through the frosted glass panels of the door, I watched Samantha's sleek BMW peel out of the driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt, leaving faint black marks behind. The taillights glowed red, then vanished into the night. Jessica's soft footsteps broke the quiet as she approached from behind. William, she said gently, her voice a lifeline in the storm of my thoughts that I turned slowly, taking in the wreckage of our living room. It looked like a battlefield. Dark coffee stains spread across the Persian rug we'd bought to celebrate our 20th anniversary, a painful reminder of happier times. Inheritance papers lay scattered across the floor, like fallen autumn leaves, crumpled and out of place. The family photo, knocked over in the chaos, caught the soft glow of the lamp, its silver frame glinting as if mocking us. 43 years, I whispered, more to myself than to Jessica. 43 years of working overtime, missing dinners, skipping vacations so Samantha could have everything. New clothes for high school, textbooks for college, that shiny car for her 16th birthday. My voice cracked. The wedding we couldn't afford but paid for anyway, because we wanted her to feel special. Jessica knelt, carefully gathering the scattered papers, her hands moving with the same quiet grace she'd always had. She's struggling, William, she said softly, stacking the documents neatly. She's not herself right now. Her gambling is her choice. I snapped, the words sharper than I meant. Every trip to the casino, every secret bet online, every lie about where the money went. Those are her choices, Jessica. Not mine. Not ours. I crossed the room to the mantel and picked up the fallen family photo. In it, 5-year-old Samantha grinned up at me, her front teeth missing, her tiny hands gripping my shoulders as we laughed together at the county fair. When had that happy, carefree girl turned into this angry stranger, demanding a hand over my life savings to fuel her addiction? Remember that dollhouse she wanted for Christmas? I asked, my fingers brushing the glass over her smiling face. The one from that fancy toy store downtown. I worked double shifts for 2 months to buy it. 2 months of late nights and early mornings just to see her face light up. Jessica nodded, her eyes distant. I remember, she said quietly. We both did. The ballet lessons we stretched our budget for, the summer camps we saved up to afford, the brand name shoes she begged for because all her friends had them. Every sacrifice we made gladly, believing it was for her happiness. And now? Now she threw coffee mugs and screamed at me because I wouldn't sign over my retirement fund to cover her debts. She didn't throw it at you, William, Jessica said, her voice gentle but firm. She threw it at the floor. I shook my head. Does it matter? The mug, the floor, the rug, it's all the same. The anger, the disrespect, it's all the same. I bent down and picked up one of the inheritance documents from the floor. The legal words blurred together as I stared at them, but I knew every line by heart. Years of planning, saving, and dreaming, all reduced to a battleground because of her choices. That I set the paper down and looked at Jessica, her face etched with the same exhaustion I felt. We gave her everything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And now she thinks she's entitled to what's left. But this time, I'm done. No more checks, no more bailouts. She needs to face her problems, not run to us to fix them. Jessica reached out, her hand resting lightly on my arm. She's still our daughter, she said, her voice trembling. She's lost right now, but she's still ours. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the little girl in the photo was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the anger and the bad choices. But as I looked around the ruined living room, the stains on the rug, the scattered papers, and the slammed door still echoing in my mind, I wasn't so sure. For years, Jessica and I had planned carefully, saved diligently, and put off our own wants to ensure our daughter, Samantha, would be financially secure after we were gone. It was all part of the dream we had for her, a stable future, free from worry. This is Peter's doing, Jessica said softly, her voice heavy with frustration. He's the one filling her head with these ideas about what she's owed. But deep down, we both knew Peter, Samantha's husband, didn't create her greed. He just gave it a voice, a reason to surface. The painful truth lingered in the air between us. Our daughter had become someone we hardly recognized. We had enabled her behavior, always stepping in to fix her problems with money. Every time she faced a crisis, whether it was a late bill, a bad decision, or another impulsive purchase, we wrote the check, smoothed things over, and made it go away. But it never stopped. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. Hey, text from an unknown number, but I knew instantly it was Samantha. Her words were sharp, cutting deep. Dad, I hope you're proud of yourself. The kids need winter coats and school supplies, but I guess your precious money matters more than your grandchildren. Don't expect to see them anytime soon, grandchildren. Samantha always knew how to aim for the heart. Emma, 8, and Jake, 6, were caught in the middle of their mother's endless demands for cash. She wielded their names like weapons, knowing how much it hurt us to be cut off from them. I showed the message to Jessica. Her face fell, eyes welling with tears. She wouldn't really keep them from us, would she? She whispered. But we both knew the answer. Samantha had done it before, small stretches of silence, a week or two when we didn't give in right away. The kids were her leverage, pawns in her game to get what she wanted. Maybe we should rethink this, William, Jessica said, her voice trembling. No, I snapped, the word sharp and final. No more. My tone startled her. In our 38 years of marriage, I'd rarely been this angry. I won't let her hold the kids over our heads. I won't teach Emma and Jake that love is something you buy or that family is just a transaction. Jessica flinched, unaccustomed to the cold resolve in my voice. Something had changed that night. The image I'd held of our family built on love and sacrifice had shattered like a dropped glass point. 6 days later, I sat on the front porch, trying to find comfort in the familiar routine of a Father's Day morning. The Sunday paper lay open on my lap, but I couldn't focus. My coffee had gone cold in the mug I still clutched, more out of habit than desire. Across the street, the Hendersons were packing their minivan for a family trip, their kids laughing as they tossed a ball. The Patels were in their garden, pulling weeds and chatting, their voices carrying on the warm breeze. Inside, Jessica moved around the kitchen, the clink of breakfast dishes a soft reminder of normal life. But nothing felt normal. We'd spent the week tiptoeing around the subject of Samantha. Neither of us mentioned her name, but her absence hung heavy, like a storm cloud waiting to break. In the 3 years since her financial troubles began, she'd never gone this long without reaching out. Usually, by day 3, she'd call with half-hearted apologies, easing into smaller requests before hitting us with another big demand. But this silence was different, complete, deliberate, almost calculated. Part of me felt a flicker of relief, but another part couldn't shake the worry. What was she planning? The low rumble of a delivery truck interrupted my thoughts. I glanced up from the paper to see a brown UPS van slowing in front of our house. Odd. We weren't expecting anything, and Sunday deliveries were unusual unless someone paid extra. The driver stepped out, checked his device, and pulled a medium-sized box from the back. He walked toward me with the brisk efficiency of someone working overtime on a holiday. "William Carr?" he asked, holding out the package. I nodded. "Happy Father's Day," he said with a grin, handing me the box and his clipboard to sign. "Someone must really care about you to spring for Sunday delivery." I signed my name, glancing at the shipping label. No return address, just standard shipping details. The box was about the size of a shoebox, but surprisingly light, maybe 2 pounds at most. "Who's it from?" Jessica called from the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a dish towel as she stepped onto the porch. "No clue," I replied, turning the package over in my hands. I carried it inside and set it on the coffee table, where just 6 days ago, we'd spread out inheritance papers, trying to make sense of our fractured family. The box sat there, unopened, like a question mark in the middle of our quiet morning. Jessica looked at it, then at me, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. "Are you going to open it?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, unsure why the sight of that plain brown box made my chest tighten. Jessica approached the plain brown box on our coffee table, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. She'd always been more cautious about unexpected deliveries than I was, thanks to years of hearing about package scams and dangerous mail on the news. "Maybe it's from the grandkids," she said, but her voice lacked confidence. I remembered Emma, our youngest granddaughter, asking about Father's Day last month during our visit, before everything went sour with our daughter, Samantha, before her angry threats and ultimatums. I pushed those dark thoughts aside. "Could be," I replied, though something about the package felt wrong. The timing was too perfect, too planned, and Emma wouldn't have the money for a special Sunday delivery. Jessica leaned in, inspecting the box with the same careful focus she used for everything, from picking out ripe tomatoes at the store to solving her daily crossword puzzles. Her fingers brushed along the edges of the shipping label, her brow furrowing. "William," she said slowly, her voice low and serious, "don't open it." "Why not?" I asked, confused. I'd been holding the package moments ago, turning it over in my hands without a second thought. She pointed at the box, her finger trembling slightly. "Look at those holes. They're for breathing." My stomach twisted as I followed her gaze. There they were, tiny, precise punctures in the cardboard, so small I hadn't noticed them before. But now that she'd pointed them out, they were impossible to miss. "Breathing holes," I repeated, my voice hollow. "Something's alive in there," Jessica said, stepping back from the coffee table. Her words hung heavy in the air. "The question is, what?" We stood frozen in our cozy living room, staring at the innocent-looking package as if it might come to life and attack us. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows no longer felt warm and inviting. It cast eerie shadows across the box. The quiet of our suburban neighborhood suddenly seemed too still, too unsettling. "Who would send us something alive?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. That I didn't answer, but a cold dread settled in my chest. The anonymous sender, the Sunday delivery that guaranteed we'd be home, the timing on Father's Day. It all felt too deliberate. This wasn't a gift from a well-meaning relative. This was something darker, something meant to unsettle us. Before I could respond, a faint sound came from inside the box, a soft rustling, like dry leaves brushing against each other. We both froze, our eyes locked on the package. The sound stopped as quickly as it started, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Jessica grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin through my cotton shirt. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Whatever was in that box was alive, and it was starting to move. Then it came again, a low, unmistakable hiss, faint but chilling. My blood ran cold. The sound stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, heavy with anticipation. A moment later, the hissing returned, longer and more deliberate this time, like a warning. Jessica's grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. "William," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Call someone. Now." My hands fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy as I dialed 911. The words spilled out in a rush. "We have a suspicious package here with something alive inside. It was delivered this morning with no return address, and it's making sounds." The dispatcher's voice was calm but urgent. "Can you describe the sounds, sir?" I glanced at Jessica, who nodded, her eyes wide with fear. The hissing had stopped again, but we both knew it wasn't over. "It's hissing," I said, hesitating. "Like a snake." The words felt dangerous to say out loud, as if naming the threat would make it real. "Are there any visible threats or damage to the package?" The dispatcher asked. "No damage," I said, my voice cracking. "But there are small holes in the cardboard. Breathing holes. Sir, I'm dispatching officers to your location immediately. Please keep a safe distance from the package and do not attempt to open it. Can you move to another room?" "We're about 6 feet away in the living room," I said. "Should we leave the house?" "Stay inside, but keep your distance," the dispatcher instructed. "Officers will be there in about 10 minutes. Do not touch or move the package under any circumstances." The line went quiet except for the faint sound of the dispatcher typing. 10 minutes felt like a lifetime when something unknown and dangerous was sitting on our coffee table, growing more active by the second. Jessica and I backed toward the couch, our eyes never leaving the box. The sunlight glinted off its plain surface, making the tiny breathing holes seem even more sinister. "Who could have done this, William?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger that I didn't want to say it, didn't want to admit the thought that had been forming in my mind since the moment I saw those holes. But the pieces were falling into place, and they pointed to one person. "Samantha, our daughter." The argument last month had been brutal. Words we couldn't take back, accusations that cut deep. She'd threatened to make us pay, to show us she wasn't powerless. But this? Sending a living thing in a box, something that hissed and moved? It was a line I never thought she'd cross. "I'm afraid to guess," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. But deep down, I wasn't guessing. I knew. The Father's Day timing, the anonymous sender who knew exactly where we lived. And when we'd be home, it all pointed to her. The rustling came again, louder this time, followed by another hiss that seemed to vibrate through the air. Jessica's hand found mine, her fingers cold and trembling. "What if it's poisonous?" she whispered. "What if it gets out?" I squeezed her hand, trying to steady her, though my own heart was pounding. "The police are coming," I said, more to reassure myself than her. "They'll handle it." But as we stood there, waiting for the sound of sirens, the weight of the situation pressed down on us. This wasn't just about a strange package. It was about betrayal, about a daughter who might hate us enough to send something meant to scare us. Or worse. The box sat, silently now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was inside was waiting, just like us, for what came next. The strange noise from the cardboard box made us both jump back. It wasn't just the hissing we'd heard earlier. It was a rustling, like something alive was moving inside, shifting around in that small, dark space. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper as she said, "The fight, 6 days ago." Her eyes were wide, filled with worry. She didn't need to say Samantha's name. We both knew who she meant. Our minds were racing, piecing together the same awful thought, each of us getting there in our own way, tangled up in fear and disbelief. I pointed at the box, my hand shaking a little. "This isn't just anger," I said, my voice low. "This is something else." The word revenge lingered in the air, too heavy to say out loud, but too real to ignore. Our daughter, the girl we'd raised, loved, and stood by through all her mistakes, had sent us something meant to scare us, or worse. The box rattled again, louder this time, like whatever was inside was fully awake now, maybe confused or angry because of our voices and the way we kept pacing around it. "What kind of person does this to their own parents?" Jessica asked, her voice cracking with hurt. Her hands were still twisted in the apron she'd been wearing all morning, flour smudged on the fabric from baking. "Someone desperate," I answered, though the words felt too simple, like they couldn't carry the weight of what was happening. "Someone who feels like they've been hurt." But deep down, I knew it was more than that. This wasn't just a burst of anger. This was planned, thought out, like Samantha had sat down and decided to send us something cruel, something that would make our hearts race and our stomachs twist. It wasn't just a prank. It was like she wanted to punish us. The sharp sound of car doors slamming outside snapped us out of our thoughts. I rushed to the window and saw a police cruiser parked in our driveway. Its lights off, but its presence heavy. Two officers were walking up the path to our front door, their steps quick and confident, like they were ready for anything. Relief hit me so hard my legs felt wobbly. Help was here. Real help. People who knew how to deal with whatever was in that box. Soon, this nightmare would be someone else's problem, and we could breathe again. The doorbell rang, loud and sharp in the quiet of our house. I opened the door before the officer could ring it again. He stood tall, filling the doorway, his uniform crisp and his eyes sharp, like he was already scanning for danger. His name tag read T. Reeves. "Mr. Carr, I'm Officer Reeves," he said, his voice steady but kind. "We got your call about a suspicious package. Can you show me where it is?" "Thank you for coming so fast," I said, stepping back to let him in. "It's in the living room." Jessica came out of the hallway, still clutching her apron, her face pale. "Officer, we're so glad you're here," she said, her voice shaky. "We didn't know what to do. You did the right thing by calling us," Officer Reeves said, calm and in control. He wiped his boots on our welcome mat, a small gesture that felt oddly polite given the situation, then followed us to the living room. The box sat on our coffee table, looking smaller now that someone official was here. It was just a plain brown package, taped shut, with a shipping label slapped on top. But the sounds coming from it made it feel alive, like it was hiding something dangerous. "Officer." Reeves pulled a pair of blue latex gloves from his belt and snapped them on, his movements careful but practiced. "When did this arrive?" he asked, leaning closer to the box but not touching it yet. "About 40 minutes ago," I said. "It came with Sunday delivery. Someone paid extra to make sure it got here today." He studied the label, his eyes narrowing. "No return address," he said, more to himself than to us. "And you heard noises?" "Hissing." Jessica nodded, her voice small. "Yes, like a snake." She couldn't say more, but she didn't need to. "Could be a snake," Officer Reeves said, "like it." Was no big deal, though his tone stayed serious. "I've seen this kind of thing before. Usually, it's something harmless, like a garter snake, but we don't take chances." He reached for the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. We need animal control at 1247 Maple Street. Suspected live animal in a package, possibly a snake." The radio crackled, and a voice confirmed animal control would be there in 20 minutes. Officer Reeves turned back to us, his expression shifting from all business to something more curious, like he was trying to figure out the bigger picture. "Any idea who might have sent this?" he asked. The question hit me like a punch. I felt Jessica's eyes on me, waiting to see what I'd say. My throat felt tight, and my mouth went dry. "I don't know," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Maybe some kids pulling a prank." Officer Reeves raised an eyebrow, not buying it. "Kids would need a live animal, packing materials, your address, and money to pay for special delivery," he said. This took effort. Planning. Someone wanted this to happen. He was right, and it made my stomach churn. This wasn't some random joke. Someone with a reason, a motive, had gone out of their way to send us this package on Father's Day of all days. "Have you had any arguments lately?" Officer Reeves pressed, his voice gentle but firm. "Any family issues?" The words, family issues, hung in the air like a storm cloud. Jessica stiffened beside me, and I could feel the weight of her silence. We were both caught between telling the truth and protecting Samantha, even now. "Nothing that would lead to this," I said, my voice tight. But even as I spoke, I could feel the lie in my words. The fight with Samantha had been bad, screaming, tears, doors slamming. She'd stormed out, and we hadn't heard from her since. But this was something darker, something we couldn't explain. Officer Reeves nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. He stepped back from the box, keeping his eyes on it. "We'll let animal control handle the package," he said. "In the meantime, stay back and don't touch it. We'll figure out what's going on." Jessica grabbed my hand, her fingers cold and trembling. The box rustled again, a reminder that whatever was inside was still there, still waiting. And Somewhere out there, our daughter had set this in motion, leaving us to face the consequences of a choice we didn't understand. Officer Reeves studied my face, noticing my hesitation. He didn't press me, though. Instead, he pulled out a small, worn notebook and flipped it open. Any unusual charges on your credit cards lately? Maybe from pet stores or exotic animal suppliers? His question hit me hard, like a punch to the chest. Pet stores. A memory flooded back, sharp and unsettling. Last month's credit card statement had a charge I'd barely noticed at the time. $127.50 from Reptile Palace. Samantha, my daughter, had access to my card for emergencies. I'd assumed it was something harmless, maybe a toy for her kids, my grandkids. Never in a million years would I have thought it was for a snake. Mr. Carr, are you okay? Officer Reeves asked, his brow furrowing with concern. I forced a neutral expression, though my heart was pounding. I'm fine, I said, my voice tight, just thinking things over. But I wasn't fine. The pieces were falling into place, each one more disturbing than the last. The timing, Samantha's knowledge of our daily routines, her access to my credit card, the cruel choice of Father's Day for this gift. It all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. My own daughter had sent me a snake. Are you planning to file a formal report? Officer Reeves asked, his pen hovering over his notebook. We can trace the package's origin and pursue charges if we identify the sender. I glanced at Jessica, my wife, who stood nearby, her eyes reflecting the same turmoil I felt. Part of me wanted justice, wanted to hold someone accountable for this cruel prank. But a bigger part, the part that had spent 34 years loving and protecting Samantha, despite her mistakes, couldn't bear the thought of turning her over to the police. No, I said quietly. I don't want to make a big deal out of this. If it's just a prank, filing charges feels like too much. Officer Reeves scribbled something in his notebook, his face unreadable. I could tell he'd seen this before. Families choosing loyalty over justice, even when someone crossed a dangerous line. Just then, another vehicle rolled into our driveway. Through the window, I saw a white van with Animal Control Services painted on the side in bold letters. That'll be Mike Johnson, Officer Reeves said, nodding toward the van. Best wildlife guy in the county. He'll have this taken care of quickly and safely. But as I watched Mike climb out of the van, I knew the real problem was far from over. This wasn't just about a snake. It was about betrayal, about the fracture in my family that I hadn't wanted to face until now. Mike Johnson worked with calm, practiced efficiency, like someone who dealt with far stranger situations than a snake in a suburban living room. In less than 20 minutes, he'd carefully removed a 3-foot corn snake from the shipping box, confirmed it was non-venomous, and placed it into a secure carrier for transport to a local reptile rescue. Beautiful snake, he said as he latched the carrier in his van. Healthy, well-fed. Someone spent good money on this one. Corn snakes are great pets if you know how to care for them. It's a shame someone used it for whatever this was. Officer Reeves shook our hands. Before leaving, call me if you think of anything else, Mr. Carr, he said. Even pranks like this can get worse if they're not addressed. I nodded, pretending I'd cooperate, but my mind was racing with darker thoughts. As the police car and Animal Control van drove away, our quiet suburban street returned to its usual calm. But inside our home, everything felt different. The living room, once warm and familiar, now felt tainted. The coffee table had faint water stains where Mike had disinfected it. The stack of inheritance documents, papers we'd been reviewing to plan for our family's future, sat neatly on the table, but they no longer felt like tools for unity. They were evidence of the betrayal that had led to this morning's chaos. Jessica was in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes with more force than necessary. It was her way of coping with stress, a habit I'd seen through every family crisis. I stood by the front window, watching our neighbors, the Hendersons, pull into their driveway. Their car was packed with picnic gear, and their kids' laughter spilled out as they unloaded. Normal families, enjoying a normal Father's Day. Normal fathers who didn't receive terrifying surprises from their own children. That $127.50 charge from Reptile Palace burned in my mind. It had appeared 3 weeks ago, right after a heated argument with Samantha about the inheritance. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. She'd been upset, claiming I was being unfair, that her kids deserved more. I hadn't taken her threat seriously then, but now they echoed in my head. My phone felt like a lead weight in my hand as I scrolled to Samantha's contact. Her photo smiled up at me, a snapshot from her daughter Emma's birthday party last year, before the arguments over money, before the threats about limiting my time with my grandkids, before this snake arrived. Are you really going to call her? Jessica asked, her voice soft as she stood in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a towel. I have to know for sure, I said. And if she admits it? I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. What would I do if my suspicions were true? What could a father do when his daughter crossed such a terrible line? I pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before Samantha answered. Dad. Her voice was bright, almost too cheerful, the tone she used when she wanted something or was hiding something. Happy Father's Day. How's your day going? My grip tightened on the phone. How's my day going? If she was innocent, it was a harmless question. If she was guilty, it was a cruel taunt. It's been an interesting morning, I said, keeping my tone even. Samantha, you wouldn't know anything about a strange Father's Day gift, would you? No, Dad, what happened? Her reply came too fast, too polished. But then, in the background, I heard it. Peter, her husband, laughing softly. Not a surprised laugh, not the sound of someone hearing unexpected news. It was a smug, satisfied chuckle, the kind someone makes when they think they've pulled off something clever. That laugh hit me like a slap. Any doubt I'd been clinging to vanished. My daughter had sent me a snake, and her husband thought it was funny. Just a mix-up with a delivery, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Nothing important. I'll let you go. Are you sure everything's okay? Samantha asked. You sound weird. Weird? I nearly laughed. My only daughter had tried to scare me with a live snake, and she thought I sounded weird. Everything's fine, Samantha. Enjoy your Sunday. I hung up before she could say more, before my carefully controlled calm could shatter. Jessica looked at me, her eyes full of questions she didn't ask. I didn't have answers yet, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a prank. It was a message, a deliberate act of cruelty from the daughter I'd spent my life protecting. And now, I had to decide what to do about it. The phone shook in my hands as the sting of betrayal hit me hard. My daughter, Samantha, had crossed a line, and the weight of it settled deep in my chest. Jessica, my wife, appeared beside me, her eyes scanning my face with the quiet understanding that comes from 38 years of marriage. You heard something, didn't you? She asked softly, her voice steady but concerned. In the background, Peter's laughter echoed from the living room, flat and hollow, like he was trying to brush off the tension. When Jessica pressed me for details, he let out another laugh, sharp and forced, as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Her hand rested gently on my arm, grounding me as the world of our family seemed to tilt. What are you going to do? She asked, her tone careful but firm. I glanced at the phone, then toward my home office down the hall, where my computer sat waiting. That machine held access to everything: bank accounts, credit cards, all the financial lifelines that had kept Samantha afloat for years. I'm going to teach our daughter about consequences, I said, my voice low but certain. By 7 p.m., I was in my office, the door shut, the soft hum of the computer filling the quiet evening. I'd spent the afternoon walking our neighborhood, the familiar streets lined with tidy lawns and blooming flowers. Each step helped me think, letting me piece together the last 30 years of financial choices that led to this moment. The anger I'd felt earlier had cooled into something sharper, more focused, a determination to act. My desk was covered with proof of my generosity toward Samantha. Bank statements showed monthly transfers to cover her rent. Credit card bills I'd paid without a second thought. Insurance payments, car loans, emergency cash I'd sent her, never repaid. 3 decades of support I'd mistaken for love. Next to my keyboard sat a worn leather folder, stuffed with papers I'd looked at too many times. Copies of checks I'd written for her wedding. Receipts from the car I sold to pay off her gambling debts. Bank transfers labeled emergency help that had turned into a monthly habit. Every document told the same story: a daughter who saw her father as a bottomless wallet instead of a guide. I shook my head, the truth settling in. I'd enabled her for too long. The computer screen lit up as I opened our online banking site. My fingers typed the familiar passwords, codes I'd kept private, though Samantha had found ways to get what she needed without them. First, I pulled up the credit card account. 3 weeks ago, It showed a charge from Reptile Palace, of all places. A live snake, sent as a Father's Day gift. I shook my head again. Samantha was still listed as an authorized user, a privilege I'd given her in college for emergencies. Those emergencies, meant for a 20-year-old, had spiraled into a lifestyle. I clicked Manage Users. The system asked for security answers, my mother's maiden name, the street I grew up on. Simple questions that unlocked tools I should have used years ago. The screen prompted me. Remove authorized user? I stared at the blue text, my cursor hovering over confirm. For maybe 10 seconds, I paused, not out of doubt, but because I could feel something shifting inside me. 30 years of funding her recklessness. 30 years of cleaning up her messes. Enough. I clicked. User access revoked. Changes will take effect within 1 business hour. Next, I tackled the PIN codes. Samantha had figured them out somehow, probably watching me during one of her many rescue visits. I chose new numbers. 1977, the year Jessica and I got married. A number tied to us, not her schemes. Then came the automatic payments. Monthly transfers to her checking account. Her car insurance. Even a gym membership she'd sworn was vital. For her mental health. Each cancellation needed confirmation. A small digital step toward cutting the cord. I worked methodically, my hands steady, no shaking, no second guessing. This wasn't punishment. It was accountability, long overdue. I thought back to last month's phone call. Samantha, crying, begging for help with her latest gambling debt. This is the last time, Dad, I swear, she'd said. I'd believed her, sent $5,000, and told Jessica we were helping her grow up. Instead, I taught her she could dodge consequences forever. No more. The final screen showed a summary of my changes. Credit access gone, automatic payments stopped, PINs updated. 30 years of enabling, undone in 45 minutes of careful clicks. Save changes. I leaned back in my chair, glancing out the window. The neighborhood hummed with its usual calm. The Hendersons were grilling in their backyard, the smoky scent drifting. Over. Mrs. Patterson shuffled by with her little dog, pausing at our mailbox. Normal families, normal lives, not dealing with daughters who sent live snakes as gifts. That I clicked save. The confirmation popped up. Account changes processed. Updated information available immediately. For the first time in years, I felt in control. When it came to Samantha, not the frantic, reactive control of fixing her latest disaster, but the calm strength of a parent who'd remembered that love sometimes means saying no. Tomorrow, she'd wake up to a new reality. Her credit card would be declined at the coffee shop. Her car insurance payment would bounce. The gym membership she barely used? Canceled. Her endless access to my bank account would be gone. For the first time in decades, Samantha would face the consequences of her choices alone. I wasn't cutting her off out of anger. I was giving her a chance to learn, to grow, to stand on her own. And maybe, just maybe, she'd understand that love doesn't always come with a check. The phone on my desk stayed quiet, but I knew that peace wouldn't last. The morning felt unusually calm, a rare moment of stillness in my usually hectic life. I sat at our kitchen table, sipping coffee and flipping through the newspaper, while sunlight poured through Jessica's herb garden on the windowsill. The basil and rosemary glowed in the warm light, and for the first time in years, I felt no weight of worry about sudden financial problems or manipulative phone calls. Jessica moved around the kitchen with her usual grace, refilling my coffee mug with the quiet ease of 38 years of shared mornings. She hadn't asked about my late night at the office, but her small, knowing smile told me she understood exactly what I'd done at 8:15. The phone rang, shattering the calm. Samantha's name flashed on the caller ID, just as I'd expected. I let it ring twice more, taking those moments to steady myself, feeling the weight of what was coming. "Good morning, Samantha," I said, keeping my voice even. "Dad, what have you done?" Her voice was sharp, filled with panic, hitting me like a slap. "My card isn't working. I tried to buy groceries, and it was declined. My car insurance. Payment bounced, too. What's going on?" I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her words settle. "Samantha, I know you sent me that Father's Day gift." The line went quiet for a few heartbeats. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from panic to anger, like she was ready to fight. "You've lost it, Dad. How could you do this to me? You're setting me up." Setting her up. Not, "What are you talking about?" or "What gift?" Her reaction confirmed what I already suspected. The woman who sent me a live snake in the mail was now accusing me of playing games. I kept my voice calm. I didn't do anything, Samantha. I just stopped paying for your bad choices. This is crazy, she shouted. You can't just cut me off like this, with no warning. I have bills, responsibilities, a life to manage. Responsibilities. The word hung in the air. Responsibilities like treating your parents with respect. Responsibilities like managing your own money instead of relying on mine. Jessica paused her morning routine, watching me closely, checking for any sign of stress. But I felt surprisingly calm, almost detached from Samantha's outburst. Dad, please, she said, her voice softening, trying a new tactic. You don't get it. Peter and I are struggling. The apartment rent is due, and the car payment, your car payment, the one you've been covering for 2 years. The rent that comes straight out of your account every month. We can't handle this right now. Maybe it's time you learned what real financial responsibility looks like, I said, my tone steady. Fine. Her voice spiked again, shrill and desperate. If you want to play games, don't expect to see your grandkids anytime soon. Emma and Jake won't even know who you are by the time I'm done. Samantha, I said, my voice firm but quiet, cutting through her threat. Those kinds of threats stopped working yesterday. The line went silent except for her quick, uneven breathing. I could almost picture her scrambling, searching for the old tricks that always worked to guilt me into giving in. I can't believe you're doing this to me, she whispered, switching to a softer, victim-like tone that had pried open my wallet too many times before. I'm your daughter. I'm struggling, and instead of helping, you're punishing me for something I didn't even do. Something she didn't do. Still no real denial, no confusion about the gift I'd mentioned, just a vague dodge. From someone who knew exactly what they'd done. Your struggles aren't my responsibility anymore, I said. Your choices got you here. Your choice to send that package. Your choices will decide what happens next. You're being ridiculous, she snapped. It was just a stupid prank. One little joke, and you're acting like I've committed a crime. A prank. There it was, not quite an admission, but close enough. She'd sent a live snake to our house as a joke, and now she expected me to keep funding her life like nothing had happened. A prank with a dangerous animal isn't a little joke, Samantha, I said. And a father stopping financial support after 30 years of enabling isn't losing his mind. It's finally waking up. Her voice turned cold, sharp as ice. This isn't over, old man. You think you can control me by cutting off the money? We'll see about that. The line went dead. I set the phone down carefully and looked at Jessica. Her eyes were bright with quiet pride, like she was seeing a side of me she hadn't in years. The sunlight still danced through her herb garden, and my coffee still tasted warm and perfect. She's coming here, Jessica said softly, breaking the silence that I nodded. Probably with Peter. They'll want to have this fight in person. Are you ready for that? She asked, her voice steady but searching. That I thought about it for a moment. Was I ready for my daughter to storm into our home with her unemployed husband, demanding money she never earned, throwing threats about grandchildren she'd already used as leverage? Yes, I said, feeling the truth of it. I think I am. Not 10 minutes later, the roar of a car engine tore through the morning quiet. Tires screeched as the car jerked to a stop in our driveway, followed by the sharp slam of 2 car doors. Jessica and I shared a look. We knew who it was. Heavy footsteps stomped up the front walkway, each step loud with purpose. The doorbell rang once, harsh and impatient. Then again when we didn't answer fast enough. I stood slowly, my calm holding. Steady despite the storm about to hit. Stay here, I told Jessica gently. No, she said, her voice strong and certain. We faced this together. The doorbell gave way to loud, insistent knocking, like they were trying to break through the door with their fists. I walked to the front entrance, took a deep breath, and opened it. Samantha stood on the porch, her face red with fury, her hair messy as if she'd thrown on clothes and sped over in a rage. Peter stood behind her, his broad frame tense, his eyes dark with an anger I'd never seen aimed at me before. Dad, Samantha said, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. We need to talk. Now. We talked this morning, I said, standing firm in the doorway, not stepping aside to let them in. I thought I made myself clear. Clear. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You were out of your mind. You can't just cut me off over some stupid misunderstanding about a Father's Day package. You owe me an explanation. I looked at her, then at Peter, who hadn't said a word but stood there like a silent threat. I don't owe you anything, Samantha, I said. Not after what you did. Not after years of carrying your responsibilities. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw the same calculating look she'd used since she was a teenager, always, knowing exactly how to push my buttons. But this time, I wasn't budging. Jessica stood beside me, her presence steady and unwavering, and I knew we were ready for whatever came next. Samantha stood on my doorstep, her face tight with anger, demanding money again. Even now, she couldn't admit what she'd done. There's no mistake, Samantha, I said firmly. You sent me a snake in the mail. I reacted the way anyone would. Peter, her husband, stepped closer, his large frame blocking more of the doorway. Listen, old man, he said, his voice sharp. You're not thinking straight. Samantha has bills to pay, responsibilities. The kids need things. I stayed calm, my voice steady. Kids whose mother threatens to keep them from their grandparents. When she doesn't get cash. Samantha's face twisted with desperate rage. Fine, she spat. If you want to play tough, you'll never see Emma or Jake again. They'll grow up knowing their grandfather chose money over family. Her words used to cut deep, striking at my worst fears. But now, they felt empty, powerless against the truth I'd come to see. I looked at my daughter, no longer the little girl I'd raised, but a stranger who manipulated everyone around her. Samantha, I said quietly, that's not a threat. That's a relief. Her eyes widened in shock. This wasn't the reaction she expected, not the crushing blow that always made me give in before. Peter's jaw dropped. What? He stammered. If you're the kind of person who uses your own children as pawns against their grandparents, I said, then maybe it's better they're not around that kind of behavior while they're young. Peter's face darkened, and he stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of his anger. We know where you live, old man, he said, his voice low and threatening. We know your habits, your daily routine. You might want to rethink your choice. Behind me, I felt Jessica stiffen, but I didn't move. Are you threatening me, Peter? I asked, my tone calm but firm. I'm just saying family works both ways, he growled. You cut us off? Fine. But don't expect us to just walk away quietly. Actually, I replied, that's exactly what I expect. And if you don't, that's a matter for the police, not a family discussion. Samantha grabbed Peter's arm, maybe realizing he was crossing a dangerous line, but it didn't calm him. If anything, it made him bolder. You think you're so clever, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You think cutting off our money makes you strong? There are other ways to get what we need. I'm sure there are, I said. Like getting jobs, for example. It's a simple idea. People have been working to support themselves for centuries. Samantha's eyes flashed with fury. This isn't over, she hissed. You'll regret treating us like this. Family doesn't abandon family, and you'll face consequences for this. There are already consequences, I said, my voice steady. You're living them right now. They stared at me, stunned, as if finally realizing that their usual tactics, threats, guilt, manipulation, weren't going to work anymore. The man who had been their personal bank for 30 years had closed his doors for good. Without another word, Samantha turned and stormed back to their car, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Peter followed, but not before throwing me one last menacing glare. I stood in the doorway, watching as their car sped off, the engine roaring louder than necessary. Only when their taillights vanished around the corner did I close the door and turned to Jessica. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a spark I hadn't seen in years, pride, mixed with a quiet strength. We're going to need a lawyer, I said, my voice low. She nodded, her lips pressed tight. I know. That evening, the house felt calm again, the kind of quiet that had become rare but precious. Jessica and I sat at the kitchen table after dinner, the familiar routine grounding us after the morning's chaos. The kitchen had always been our safe space for tough conversations. We'd sat here years ago, planning to buy this house, dreaming about retirement, and worrying over Samantha's early struggles with money. Now, it was where we faced the reality of our broken family. Jessica sipped her chamomile tea, her hands wrapped around the warm mug. I held my second cup of coffee, the bitterness matching my mood. We were both still processing the day's events, the weight of it settling over us like a heavy fog. I keep thinking about when Samantha was little, Jessica said softly, her voice thick with emotion. She was 8, remember? She made that Mother's Day breakfast, burnt toast and orange juice with too much pulp. She was so proud of herself. I nodded, the memory vivid. Samantha in her pink pajamas, standing on a stool to reach the counter, determined to surprise us with breakfast in bed. Her small hands had fumbled with the toaster, but her smile had lit up the room. That moment felt like it belonged to another life, another family. She used to draw us pictures, I said, my voice quiet. Stick figures of our family, all holding hands. I kept them in my desk at work for years. I think some are still in that memory box upstairs. Jessica's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. William, she said, her voice breaking, she's still our daughter. Despite everything that happened today, she's still ours. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the grief only a parent could understand. I'd been expecting them. All day, knowing Jessica's heart would always hold space for the little girl Samantha used to be. But I also knew the woman Samantha had become was someone we could no longer trust. I know, I said, reaching for her hand across the table. But we can't keep enabling her. Not anymore. Jessica squeezed my hand, her grip firm despite the tremble in her fingers. I just wish it didn't have to come to this, she said. So do I replied. But we can't change her choices. We can only protect ourselves, and Emma and Jake, from the fallout. The kitchen clock ticked softly, marking the seconds as we sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The day had been a turning point, one we'd both known was coming for years but had hoped to avoid. Now, there was no going back. We'd need to be ready for whatever Samantha and Peter tried next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of resolve. The manipulation, the threats, the endless demands, they were over. We'll get through this, I said, meeting Jessica's eyes. Together. She gave me a small, sad smile. Together, she echoed. And in that quiet kitchen, with the weight of the day still lingering, we began to plan for the future. One where we protected our peace. No matter the cost. Jessica's heart was always set on fixing things, finding a way to bring peace, and mending what was broken. It was one of the reasons I fell in love with her all those years ago. She had this unshakable belief that families could get through anything, no matter how tough. Jess, I said softly, my voice steady but heavy. She went too far this time. I need to take one last step. Her teacup froze halfway to her mouth, her eyes searching mine. What kind of step? She asked, her voice trembling with worry. I looked at my wife's face, seeing the hope that whatever I was planning might somehow bring our daughter, Samantha, back to us. How could I tell her that bringing Samantha back wasn't my goal anymore? Something final, I said, my words careful but firm. Something to make sure this morning's mess never happens again. Jessica's eyes widened. You're talking about changing the will, aren't you? It wasn't a question. After 30 years of marriage, she knew how my mind worked. She understood that legal steps were the only way left to protect us, among other measures. Yes, I admitted. She went quiet, her face tight with thought. Changing our estate plan wasn't just about money. It was a loud, clear statement that we no longer trusted our daughter. It was admitting that the girl we raised was gone, replaced by someone we didn't recognize. What about the grandchildren? Jessica asked after a long pause, her voice soft but urgent. Emma and Jake, they deserve something, don't they? I reached across the kitchen table and took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her fingers. Jess, we'll make sure Emma and Jake are taken care of. Their education, their future, it'll be secure. But we need to teach them that love isn't something you can buy with cash. Jessica's thumb brushed over my knuckles, a small gesture that had carried us through decades of challenges. But this wasn't like those smaller problems. This was the end of something we'd held dear. What she did today wasn't just a desperate act, I said, my voice steady but heavy with pain. It was cruel, planned. The snake in our mailbox, the threats, the way she tried to manipulate us. It's who she's become. Jessica's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. If we cut her out completely, will it protect us? Will it keep her from hurting us again? She asked. I squeezed her hand gently. It'll take away her reason to keep coming back. No money, no inheritance, no leverage. She'll have to find someone else to manipulate. The words felt cold, but they were true. Samantha had a pattern, and we weren't the only ones who'd seen it. She'd move on to easier targets, people who didn't yet know her tricks. I hate that it's come to this, Jessica whispered, her voice breaking. So do I said, my throat tight. But I won't let her hold us hostage with her threats. I won't let her destroy what we've built. Our marriage, our peace, our retirement. Outside our kitchen window, the neighborhood went on with its quiet evening routine. The Hendersons walked their golden retriever, and Mrs. Patterson sprinkled water over her roses. Normal life, just out of reach for us right now. When will you do it? Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tomorrow morning, I said. I'll call Margaret Summers first thing. She's been our lawyer for 15 years. She'll make sure everything is airtight. Jessica nodded slowly, her face a mix of acceptance and grief. And if Samantha finds out? She asked. She will, eventually, I said. But by then, the legal protections will be in place. Her anger won't touch us anymore. I stood up, gathering our empty teacups and carrying them to the sink. Behind me, I heard Jessica's soft sigh, not disagreement, but the sound of a mother mourning the daughter we'd lost. Tomorrow, I'd take that final step. But tonight, I'd hold my wife and let her grieve for the family we thought we'd always have. The next morning, I sat in Margaret Summers' law office on the third floor of a solid granite building downtown. The walls were lined with heavy legal books, a reminder of the many families she'd helped protect over the years. I sat across from her polished mahogany desk, a manila folder of documents in my hands, feeling a strange calm despite the weight of the moment. William, Margaret said, taking off her reading glasses and folding her hands. When you called this morning, you said you needed strong legal protection. Tell me what's been going on. Margaret had handled our wills, our property transfers, and even Jessica's mother's estate years ago. To her, we were the reliable couple who planned ahead and paid on time. What I was about to tell her would sound like a completely different family. I took a deep breath and started. I told her about the argument over the inheritance, how Samantha had sent a live snake to our house as a scare tactic, how we'd had to block our credit cards after she tried to use them, and the threatening confrontation just yesterday. They know where we live, our routines, I said, my voice steady but grim. It felt like a direct threat. Margaret listened quietly, jotting down notes, her face growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she set her pen down and leaned back in her chair. William, this isn't just a family argument, she said. This is harassment, intimidation. We need to tackle this from multiple angles to protect you and Jessica. That's what I was hoping you'd say, I replied, feeling a flicker of relief. Margaret pulled out a fresh legal pad, her pen poised. Let's start with your will, she said. You mentioned wanting to change how your estate is handled. I nodded. I want our money to go to Emma and Jake's education, not to Samantha's gambling debts or whatever else she's caught up in. That's a smart move, William, Margaret said, her voice warm but professional. We can set up trust for the grandchildren to ensure the money is used for their education and future. We'll also need to update your will to reflect that. Samantha is no longer a beneficiary. But we should go further. Consider a restraining order if her behavior escalates. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the decision settling over me. This wasn't just about money or legal papers. It was about closing a chapter of our lives, one we'd hoped would never end like this. Let's do whatever it takes, I said. I want Jessica and me to have peace again. Margaret nodded, already sketching out the plan. We'll make it ironclad, she said. You and Jessica deserve to live without fear. As she spoke, I felt a small spark of hope, not for fixing what was broken, but for protecting what we still had. William sat across from Margaret, his lawyer, in her quiet office. The weight of years of family stress pressed on his shoulders, but today felt different. He was here to take control, to protect his family, and to finally set boundaries that had been ignored for too long. His daughter, Samantha, and her husband, Peter, had caused enough chaos. It was time to act. Margaret listened carefully as William explained his concerns. Samantha's demands for money had grown relentless, draining their savings and peace of mind. Her latest stunt, leaving a live snake in their mailbox to scare them, crossed a line. It wasn't just a prank. It was a calculated act to intimidate her elderly parents. William wanted to protect his wife, Jessica, their home, and their grandchildren. Emma and Jake, from Samantha's manipulative behavior. Let's start with the will, Margaret said, her voice calm but firm. We can create an educational trust fund for Emma and Jake. It will cover their schooling, college, and any legitimate educational needs, but Samantha and Peter will have no access to it. William nodded, relieved. The idea of securing his grandchildren's future without their parents' interference felt right. Margaret outlined the plan. An independent trustee would manage the trust, ensuring funds were only released for verified educational expenses like tuition, books, or school supplies. Samantha and Peter would have no control, no way to dip into the money for their own purposes. What about Jessica? William asked, thinking of his wife's safety and their shared assets. Fully protected, Margaret assured him. The house, your retirement accounts, Jessica's security, none of that changes. This only affects what Samantha would have inherited. Next, they turned to the restraining order. Margaret opened a new file on her computer and began typing, documenting the recent confrontation with Samantha and Peter. William recounted the snake incident, the threatening phone calls, and the years of escalating demands. Using a live animal to scare you shows planning and malice, Margaret said, her fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. Courts take this kind of behavior seriously. How long will this take? William asked, eager for resolution. Margaret explained that the will changes could be finalized within a week. The restraining order could be filed that same day. Once it's approved, any contact from Samantha or Peter becomes a legal issue, not just a family argument, she said. William felt a knot in his chest loosen. The constant dread of Samantha's next crisis, the tiptoeing around her temper, the enabling of her destructive habits. It was all coming to an end. There's one more thing, Margaret added, her tone serious. I recommend keeping detailed records of everything. Save any messages, emails, or attempts at contact from Samantha or Peter. If they violate the restraining order or try to involve Emma and Jake, you'll need evidence for future legal action. William nodded, understanding the reality. You think things might get worse before they get better, he said. Margaret didn't sugarcoat it. People who rely on manipulation don't usually accept boundaries easily. When Samantha learns she's been cut out of the will and served with a restraining order, she may react strongly. But William wasn't afraid anymore. With legal protections in place, Samantha's anger would face a system designed to handle such behavior, not two aging parents trying to enjoy their retirement. Margaret's assistant brought in the prepared documents. As William signed each page, he felt a sense of finality. 30 years of financial enabling, of bailing Samantha out of her self-inflicted crises, was officially over. Their home would be safe from harassment. Margaret confirmed the restraining order should be approved by the end of the day, and court officers would serve Samantha and Peter by the next morning. After that, she said, any contact with you or Jessica becomes a criminal matter. William stood, shaking Margaret's hand, grateful for her help in reclaiming control of his life. As he stepped toward the door, Margaret called out, William, you've made the right choices. Your family's safety and peace come first. He nodded, tucking the folder of documents under his arm. Outside her office, the city hummed with its usual rhythm. Cars passing, people walking, life moving forward. For the first time in years, William felt part of that normalcy. The next 2 days were the most peaceful William and Jessica had experienced in a long time. Without Samantha's constant demands, they slipped back into the simple routines they loved. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, no longer interrupted by frantic phone calls. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood were calm, no checking for missed messages. Evenings meant dinners together, filled with quiet conversation instead of debates about Samantha's latest emergency. Jessica's smile returned, and William felt lighter, like a burden had been lifted. On Thursday afternoon, Margaret called with an update. William, the documents were delivered at 2:15 today. Samantha and Peter have been served with the restraining order and received copies of the will changes. It's done. William thanked her and hung up, sitting in his favorite chair by the living room window. Outside, their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was tending to her garden, planting bright spring flowers. The Henderson kids rode their bikes up and down the sidewalk, laughing. It was the kind of peaceful suburban scene William and Jessica had always cherished. Jessica appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes searching his. The papers were delivered? She asked softly. This afternoon, William confirmed. It's finished. She crossed the room and sat beside him, taking his hand. They didn't need to speculate about Samantha's reaction or worry about her finding ways around the legal barriers. The law was clear, and Margaret's work was thorough. The trust fund would secure Emma and Jake's education. The restraining order would keep Samantha and Peter at a distance, and their home was protected as they sat together, watching the world outside. William felt a deep sense of relief. The chaos that had defined their lives for so long was over. They could finally focus on their own happiness, their grandchildren's future, and the quiet joys of retirement. For the first time in years, they were free. For the first time in over 30 years, I felt free. The legal protections we put in place were strong and clear, shielding us from my daughter Samantha's manipulation. I sat quietly, thinking about the little girl I'd raised. She used to draw stick figure families with bright crayons and surprise us with breakfast in bed on Mother's Day or birthdays. Her giggles filled our home with joy. But that sweet child had grown into someone unrecognizable, a woman who sent live snakes to my doorstep and threatened to keep my grandchildren, Emma and Jake, away from me if I didn't give her money. The change happened so slowly that I spent years making excuses for her hurtful actions. I told myself she was just going through a rough patch, that she'd get better. But standing on my porch, demanding cash while yelling threats, she wasn't the daughter I knew anymore. I couldn't keep enabling her. The legal documents changed everything. They set boundaries that my love for her could never create. A restraining order kept her away, and changes to my will protected our family's future. Samantha had spent years threatening to cut me off from Emma and Jake unless I paid her demands. Now, her own actions had made that separation permanent. The irony was heavy. She'd lost the inheritance she'd fought so hard to control. But I made sure Emma and Jake were taken care of. Their educational trust fund, managed by professionals who couldn't be swayed by Samantha's tactics, would cover their college tuition, books, tutoring, and other legitimate needs. The money was safe, out of reach from parents who'd proven they couldn't handle it responsibly. Jessica, my wife, sat beside me at the kitchen table. She squeezed my hand gently, her eyes soft with understanding. "Do you think Samantha realizes what she's lost?" she asked. "She will?" I replied, my voice steady. "The restraining order means any attempt to contact us is a crime now. The will changes mean there's no money for her to chase. She'll have to find someone else to manipulate." My words felt heavy but true. If she violates the order, it's the police's problem, not ours. For 3 decades, I'd been Samantha's safety net. Every time she fell, I caught her. I paid off her gambling debts, even selling my beloved classic car to cover them. I paid her rent when she claimed emergencies, like a broken water heater or a sudden job loss. I wrote check after check, always hoping this would be the last time, that she'd finally learn to stand on her own. But she never did. The final straw came when she sent that box of live snakes to our home. It was her way of saying how she saw our relationship, something dangerous, meant to scare me into giving her what she wanted. Instead, it pushed me to act. I went to my lawyer, Margaret, and got the legal protections I should have sought years ago. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the kitchen with warm orange light, Jessica and I cooked dinner together. We moved with an ease we hadn't felt in years, no longer weighed down by family drama. The phone didn't ring with desperate calls. No frantic texts demanded money for another emergency. No threats about losing contact with our grandchildren loomed over us. The silence was peaceful, like the calm after a long, exhausting storm. Tomorrow, we'd wake up in a home protected by the law. Our retirement savings, carefully built over years, would stay safe, growing for our future instead of being drained by Samantha's reckless choices. Our marriage, once strained by the constant stress of her crises, felt stronger now. I wasn't just a father who loved his daughter. I was a father who loved her enough to stop enabling her destructive path. The law had given me back my life, replacing emotional manipulation with clear boundaries and family guilt with professional consequences. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. For the first time, I wouldn't wonder what new crisis tomorrow would bring or how much it would cost me. The weight of 30 years was gone. I closed my eyes, knowing I could finally rest. If you enjoyed this story, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. To check out the next story, Click the box on the left. Thanks for watching.